So, welcome everybody to this long-awaited Instagram Live. I got such nice feedback. So we're also going to try to save this in Mirz Hashem tonight. So if you're not able to watch it now, you'll be able to watch the replay. And so what are two authors of children's books doing together on this live? You know, it's kids' books. Usually I go read my books to kids. But here we really want to put like the adult lens, the adult glasses.
I also read your books to my kids,
Oh, that's
just letting you know.
Yeah, but you know what I always say, like my children's books, I should have a column on them for adults, because like every single one of the midas that children need to work on, I could be besimcha, I could be mavater. Guess what?
Yeah.
We also need to work on it. I could write a whole book for us, making a kid's Hashem, being besimcha, and you know, like they say, everything you learned everything you need to learn in life, you learned in kindergarten, because these books are really foundational, and I think it's a little bit of like a big part of what we do. We really are talking to ourselves out loud. Like all the messages that we're writing for children are just as equally relevant to ourselves. And that's what's so beautiful about this. So I want to start off by hearing a little bit, you know, a lot of people know your column. I wrote on my status, who knows Mindy's column? And everyone's like, me. But not as many people know about your new book. So I'd love if you could tell us a little bit about the name of your book, what's behind your new book, you know, how it came to be, and how you came to writing this adorable, adorable children's book.
Yes, thank you. So let me just show it to you here. I know it's like backwards. I don't know how to do the mirror thing that it goes around. No, it's
not backwards, because your mirror is backwards, so we see it. Great.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so here. So this is my book, Hillel and the Paper Menchies. So I'll tell you how this came about, okay? What happened was that when my son was sick with cancer, he was 6 years old, and right when he got sick, I didn't know what was wrong with him. So I started to, I keep saying that I have no idea how it came to me, but I just like from 1 second to the next invented these 4 quadruplets, and like they were called Hilly, Pilly, Shimmy, and Shmaya. Now I called it Hilly after my son Hillel, Pilly because it rhymed, and then Shimmy because it just like his name is Shimon, his name was Shimon Hillel, and then Shmaya because he had a boy in his class, Shmaya. So it just kind of like, it just gelled. And I started to tell him stories about these quadruplets because he was like lethargic, he was in bed, he was throwing up. I thought it was a virus, and that was it. And then about a week later, we found out that he had a brain tumor. And then when he went into the hospital, and then he had brain surgery and then rehab and radiation, he simply could not like look at books at that point. He just like needed to listen to stories. And this actually culminated when he was doing radiation treatment. For those of you who are familiar with radiation treatment, he had to be in a room by himself for about 45 minutes to an hour without moving his head, without moving his body. And I didn't know at that time, but they actually didn't do, and they didn't do radiation treatment for kids under, I don't know, 9, 10, 11 years old without anesthesia. And I'm not quite sure why I didn't know that, but I assumed that he's just going to be awake for it. And I kind of like, and the doctors kind of went along with it. And the bottom line is that he was there by himself. And what I did is that I was by the technician's desk, and every single day for 33 days, I told another Hilly, Pilly, Shimmy, and Shmaya story. Okay, so that's part one of this book. Hang on. The second part is that when he was finished treatment, he came home after about like 2 months. He finished treatment after 3-4 months, and he was home. And before Hanukkah, I created a scrapbook of his journey in the hospital with radiation, his rehabilitation, all things. We went back to the ER. We went to the rehabilitation. We went to the radiation room. We literally traveled all around. I snapped pictures and I created a scrapbook. Years later, I took out the scrapbook and I said, maybe other kids need this scrapbook too. But I didn't want to use it with the real pictures, so I needed an illustrator to put pictures to the words that I had. And I looked around for an illustrator, and I wanted it to be a very fun kind of book. Like I want to just show you, like it's like, do you see like it's cartoons, it's colorful. So what happened is that I was like looking around for an illustrator who would just make this fun-loving and just exciting and make it seem like a happy place. You know, it's funny because a friend of mine who's a PA, she goes, you know, Mindy, she says, this is the new Curious George Went to the Hospital book. And I think that's the highest compliment I could have gotten. But in any case, I wanted something happy and fun. So I approached Mark Loomer, and he's like in California, and I said, will you illustrate this book? And I have no idea why he said yes, because he literally does mega stuff. He's like a Netflix animator and a producer. Like he's doing like mega stuff, like in animation, in videos for kids, you know, in Netflix and different kinds of places. But he took my scrapbook and he goes, Mindy, he goes, you know what kind of illustrator I am? I said, yeah. He goes, isn't this book about cancer? I said, no, this is not a book about cancer. This is a book about a kid who's fun-loving and has a challenge and just needs to get out there and to do something in order to overcome his, like, just like his scary, like his fears. He goes, does it need to be exactly this scrapbook? I said, you have a better idea? He says, yes. He says, in the scrapbook, take out Hilly Pilly, Shimmy, and Shmaya, and that's your story. So I went back and I rewrote the entire thing as a story, and this is actually the story, Hilly Pilly, Shimmy, and Shmaya. And what I did was I made it about a kid that finds out that he's sick, and he gets scared, and his mother creates for him these four. Now Mark Loomer, he called them the paper menchies. You know, it was his invention, the paper menchies. He made them from the quadruplets, the paper menchies, and she creates them. And then Hillel, the boy, makes them come alive, and they're the ones that kind of cheer him on. They're like all his wonderful parts. For those of you that go to therapy, I created them as parts of him, like the strength-based part, the humorous one, the faith, hope, you know, strength, courage, bravery. And then they're the ones that fight the other parts that he has, which is sad, mad, and scared, which are personified by like these other kinds of like creatures. And then this is the book in which, you know, these characters come alive. His imagination brings them alive, and they fight against his other hard feelings of like his big emotions of sad, mad, and scared. So this is how this book came about in a nutshell.
Wow. So interesting. You know, there's a few things I wanted to reflect back. One of them is that you wanted it to be happy. You know, it's like we're talking about a really, really sad, and you wanted it to be fun, and your energy is like bubbly, as if we're talking about like a show. And it's also interesting how you talk about how these, you know, the good parts fight the bad parts. Do you want to like explain that a little bit? What do you mean by that?
Okay. So the truth is, I don't want to call them good parts versus bad parts, because
Okay.
I'll tell you why. You're not a therapist. As the creator of parts work, IFS says that he has a book that's called There Are No Bad Parts. We simply are all these many parts in us. As a therapist, I wanted to give voice to the different parts that we have in all of us. And as a therapist, I do work with parts. It's called Internal Family Systems. It's IFS. I do work with parts work in which, how do I explain it to lay people? In which we acknowledge that we all are made up of many different parts, and they're not good or bad, but they just kind of exist in our body, and they're created as we go through wonderful things in our life and as we go through challenges. So for example, when I explain this to my clients, I say, listen, I have a 5-year-old part. This 5-year-old part loves to play in the snow. I also have like a 3-year-old part that literally when I'm 9 months pregnant, that 3-year-old part comes out, and I am the biggest kvetch in the world, and I just need a bed and put me to sleep. So these are the different parts that we have and how they come out. So I wanted to kind of convey that, that he has all these parts. He has these sad, mad, and scared parts, but then he also has all these other parts, these fun parts, these brave parts, you know, just all the other parts, and how his parts work together to really help him to overcome the challenges that he has in the hospital. So it's kind of like this freewheeling, exciting kind of pictures and plot. You know, I wanted to make the plot fun and interesting. There are jokes in there. It's not a sad thing. There is the word brain tumor in there. There is that word. There is the word radiation. There is the word surgery. But otherwise, even with that, you know, it's no different like that Curious George goes to the hospital. He also has operation to take out the puzzle piece from inside of him. Okay, so that was a monkey. I do remember, Sarah, when I was doing this book, my publisher says, do you want to change it to like maybe like animals instead of a kid? Because like a kid that goes to the hospital is too serious. And it's interesting when I even thought about it for a second, Mark said, no, Mindy, you want to make this, you want to make this a memory of Hillel, because Hillel was Nifter when he was 16. He says, this is a memory of Hillel. You want other children to celebrate his life. You want to celebrate his life and how courageous he was, because this book is like when he was about 6 to 8 years old, and the book ends with him going back to school, and he's happy, and he has like a scar, and he's a little bit wobbly on his feet, but he goes right back in there and is able to get his friends back and to kind of say, here's my scar, and I'm good to go. So he goes, you want to do that? He goes, why dumb it down? He goes, why not trust our kids that they can take a book like this and to read it and to be okay with it? And I do have to tell you, Sarah, it's so interesting because, originally, the publisher said it's going to be a specialty book about cancer. And I said, no, this is not a specialty book. This is a book for every kid. We're going to just introduce just the regular stuff into their lives. And I have to tell you that it really has become a mainstream book. And I have been getting so many comments back about it, how children are reading it and they're asking their mother, like, what's a brain tumor? But it's like anything else. It's not scary for children. It's simply just, it's part of life, and they're interested and they're reading it. And a lot of it goes over their head, and whatever it doesn't, they ask questions about. And it's just a book about a kid with a challenge. It's nothing more or less than that.
Do you
So
think
it's really,
it could help kids with other challenges?
absolutely. And I'll tell you why, because the focus here is about the character Sad, Mad, and Scared, and the paper Menchies. The fact that what his challenge is, in the book also, I also addressed various challenges. He's not walking well, so he has a challenge of like he needs physical therapy. So I think this is also like, lots of kids today are getting therapy for different things, speech therapy, OT, PT, even mental health therapy. Lots of kids are doing that. Lots of kids are in the hospital. Lots of kids have, their mothers are on the hospital. It's like, in a sense, like it's all these different things that are happening with all different kids, and any kid could relate to it. But even more, not so much like the sick part or the therapy part, but the part that I feel that kids could relate to is that in the book, what he really says, he goes, I have a scar. Kids are going to see it. They're they're going to kind of talk about it. I don't want them to talk about it. How am I going to do well in school? How am I going to have friends by recess if I'm not so good at sports? These are really just general challenges that all kids have when they worry that they're not the smartest in the class, that they're not the fastest on the playground, that they're not, they have a scar, or maybe like they have glasses, or they have maybe a brace. Like, this is just like what regular kids worry about for all different kinds of reasons. So I believe that really children, and I know because, lots of books have been sold, Baruch Hashem, it's really doing well. And kids are really just relating to the kid part of him, not to the sick part, to the kid part, that they all have these kind of challenges. And yeah, and he's just doing it. So yeah, I
Wow.
think that kids are relating to it.
You know,
Yeah.
I have to make a little confession. A few weeks ago, I was in Shul on Shabbos, and it was very hot. I couldn't feel the AC. And I just got up for a minute to go to the bathroom. When I came back, there was a kid in my seat. And I said to her, excuse me, this is my seat. And like, she had my siddur. And I could tell she was upset, but didn't really know. Like, I didn't like process it. Later, I found out she was upset because I wrote a book called I Could Be Mavater, about being Mavater your seat. So why did I ask her to get up? And it was so eye-opening for me. Kids, sometimes they hold your own books to your mirror, and I'm like, you know what? You know
Wow.
what? Like, so really what I want to ask you is like, how is this a mirror to you? How does this help you personally? How do you feel like you use your power of creativity to overcome difficult challenges or emotions?
You know what? It's a great question, and I think I just do. First of all, I'm a writer, but I always knew I was a writer. So for all of you out there, like, I'm letting you know that I first started to write when I was about 42 years old. That's when I first started to publish my first
You
writing,
look
believe it or not.
younger than that now, just saying.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Yeah, so I wrote what happened even later. even later, I think at 45 was my first published writing,
Wow.
actually, like about like a little over 10 years ago. So what happened was I was a teacher for I was a writing teacher for 11th graders, for 7th graders. I love teaching writing. I taught it. I actually taught writing in Lubavitch to my to my 7th
You
graders. If
did
any of you are listening,
teach? Someone said that
yes,
you taught.
yes,
Somebody responded that to my status. I said, I have no idea. You taught at Beis
yes.
Rivka?
Oh, I taught in Base Rivka,
I
yes, and
can't.
I
That's
adored
so
those kids.
funny. Wow. That's
And
great.
they, yeah, I adored them, and we had so much fun writing together. And and part of their mark that they had to send in their writing to be published. They actually had to do that.
Oh, wow.
They not, and some of them they had to publish in some way. So what happens is that so when Hillel got sick, I'm not quite sure how it happened. Not when he relapsed. He was 11 years old when he relapsed. And I was in the car with a bunch of friends, and they said, Mindy, you want to join our writing group? And I said, yeah, sure. And I came to the next writing group, and I wrote a short story. And Bina asked me, oh, can we have that short story? And I said, oh, wow, like, yeah, sure, take it. But the next thing I wrote was about Hillel, and it was called I Love Hospitals, and it was under a pseudonym. Oh my gosh, Sarah, I want to tell you, people had such a visceral response to that. First of
Mm.
all, people were furious. How could you say you love hospitals? What kind of, you know, cold-hearted person are you? Your kid is with cancer in the hospital, and you say, I love hospitals. What's wrong with you? So first of all, it was like my first thing is like, wow, I could write something and people can actually like care about it.
It's so
So first,
powerful.
it was very powerful. So first I was like taken aback and like really like, and I thought, did I hurt someone? Did I say something wrong? And then like, it was like, oh, bring it on. What are you nuts, all of you? Because I dealt with the hospital in a positive way. You're gonna tell me that was wrong? No, no, no. And then just from then on, I literally just started to write about him all the time under a pseudonym. And that was the beginning of the publishing. I just like literally, and so to me, it was like I just needed to use all my energy, what was happening at that time for me, and I put it into writing, and I just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. And my son said, he goes, Ma, every time you write about me, I want $25 of whatever you get. So like I wrote, and he got his $25. But
Serious?
yeah, like so that's how I transformed, what happened into my creativity. And I'll tell you the truth is I feel like being a therapist is also creative, like being in the room, because you have to invent a new therapy with every single client. And I feel that having a child with cancer and it sensitized me in a way to other challenges as well. And I feel like it's really deepened who I am as a therapist in another way, creatively, because of his illness and how I had to grow because of it. So yeah, I feel like that, that he really pushed me into being really creative, because I needed to channel like the horror of it into something. I needed to transform it into something that I could live with, and I can't live with depression. So yeah, it was my writing, it was my work, and of course there was my children and now my grandchildren. Yeah, like it's just like the celebration of life. Like when you have a sick child, it's like just that celebration of life of whoever is alive and healthy. It's so beautiful, and I'm so appreciative of every single living child in this world. I must tell you, every single healthy child. I go to shul, I never get nervous from the kids there. It's like every kid that's not behaving is like another kid that's just healthy and happy, and it's a joy to see most of the time.
It's interesting because I so relate to that. Like I look at a bunch of children's books. I have I have 28, I think now, Baruch Hashem. And I also have two books for women. But what I know with each of my books that I wrote, I'm like, that one I wrote after a miscarriage. That one I wrote because I was lonely because my husband was working nights. Like I know the challenge. Like it didn't always like reflect in what I was writing about. I didn't write for children about a miscarriage, but I so relate to the concept of taking a challenge and channeling the energy in a creative way. And
Yeah,
it's an energy that has to be channeled. That's what it is. It's like, you know what I
yeah.
mean? Like
That's
transforming
amazing,
it.
Sarah. That's really
Yeah,
amazing.
but
You can look at each book and say, that's when I wrote it. That's why I wrote it. That's the
I
energy.
do. I know my books. I know what's going on behind the
Wow.
scenes. And the truth is sometimes it takes a lot of effort to like show up. And I remember a few years ago I posted a picture of on Instagram like at Prospect Park, me smiling with my 4 kids. And then like a little while after that I posted that I had just had another miscarriage. And
Mm.
like someone told me, she's like, I'm so happy you posted that. Like she felt like it was just, like thank you for also sharing your struggle and not just sharing the beautiful picture of the park. And the truth is, I don't think it's so important for me to detail everything that's going on. What I do find is important is I feel like to acknowledge that we all have challenges and we're all here like figuring out how to overcome them. And this is part of it. Creativity is part of it. Some people paint, some people
Yeah,
sing, some people,
yeah,
right? We're all trying to uplift
yeah,
ourselves, to get higher, to overcome our negative emotions. And Hashem gave us gifts to use. Like they're almost like guideposts. Like how should we overcome our internal challenges using the gifts He gave us? Like that's what they're for, to help us get closer to Him. You know what I'm saying? So I definitely relate to that idea, and it's so funny that you taught writing in Rivka. Like,
yes, I
how do
did.
you?
I did. Oh my goodness. I'll tell you something. You know who I learned from? I was a stupid and young teacher, and there was this delicious girl who had lost her mother that year. And I was just such, I don't know, I was clueless, like seriously clueless. And so I taught writing, and they had to write and extensively, like it was really, and they had to rewrite and to revise, and they brought pillows and covers, and they were like on the floor. It was like literally a writing workshop, and they had to like,
Wow.
they're real writers. And this kid refused to show me her writing. She refused to show it, but I knew that she was writing away. You have no idea. She wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. And she and her best friend, she only let her best friend see it. And those two did the revisions together. But when I asked her to hand it in, she smiles at me very sweetly and she said no. And I said, okay. I said, I said, I'm not going to fail you because I see that you're writing, but I can't give you a great mark. I can give you, I don't know, a C or whatever. And she smiles at me very sweetly and she says, fine. Now, if I would have been a more experienced teacher, I would have given her an A, because I have no doubt that the writing that she wrote that year in 7th grade was or 6th grade was the most magnificent writing, all about her mother. I think she wrote every single thing was all about her mother. And I think about that kid, and I forgot I could see her face. I don't remember her name. And I think, I'm sure you have that writing. And it was the greatest gift that you did for yourself, that she wrote that year about her mother. And I would love to see that writing now. I would love to. But yeah, she transformed her pain into magnificent writing. She must have written, I don't know, 30, 40 pages about her mother that year.
Wow.
So yeah, writing is something really, yeah, yeah. And I have to tell you something, Sarah. I mean, I write columns about 1,000 words a column. Do you know that I can polish off 1,000 words in an hour? This book, like, maybe has 1,000 words, probably much less. It took me months, months,
Yes.
months.
I'm
Every
sure.
word,
I
every
know. Oh
word.
my gosh. Totally.
I,
Absolutely.
I, I've never worked so hard. Every single word had to count. If it didn't count, it got thrown out. I
Right.
can't begin to tell you, like, I think it's one of my best works because of that. And I need to tell you, like, I put a tremendous effort into the writer's craft, which I'm sure you do too. But like, there's something about like being a writer and every single word counts. I really wanted to make this book, first of all, universal for all people. Even though it's culturally a Jewish book, I really believe that anyone from any culture can read it. I think today, in general, like there's like a push towards like multiculturalism, like from all different cultures. And I feel that even though this is obviously a Jewish book, and I want it to be one because Hillel was a Jewish kid and his Yiddishkeit was really important to him, but yet it feels very multicultural. And even the pictures, I remember telling Mark, I said, Mark, I said, put everyone in there. So there's all cultures in here. You have like in the waiting room, like you have like an African American guy sitting there with the afro. You have the doctor is Indian. You have all you see all the cultures in there. The children are all in there. You see all different cultures, an Asian child. It felt really important to make this all inclusive, that every kid could find themselves in there. That was really important to me. And the pictures reflect that. And the text reflects that. You know, the text any kid could relate to. I know because there are lots of non-Jew people who actually bought the book, and they said like it was wonderful. Like they really were able to give it to their kids, for themselves. And there was one woman that said that she has cancer and she bought it for her daughter, and her daughter loved it and opened up conversation. But even again, not about cancer, but it was just like a way to connect. And there's one more thing that to me is really important about this book, and I say it, and you know, I buy Jewish books all the time. I buy for my grandchildren. I walk in every time you come out with a new book, Sarah. I buy it for all my kids. Like I have like four families now. I get them from all of them. But what I'm finding that we don't have enough of are storybooks.
Yeah.
We
100%.
we have a lot of great books like yours that are thematic.
Yeah.
And they're fabulous. I buy them all. They're thematic.
I agree.
You know, but we don't have enough books that are simply great stories. So when I wrote Hell in the Paper Menschis, like when I wrote this, there's actually a plot. There's a story. There's a kid that has a problem, and in the end, he overcomes his challenge, which is like, you know, which means it's an actual story with a plot. The characters are not on, the characters are three-dimensional. I mean, Hillel is, the other characters are flat characters, which is normal in a children's book. It's a short story. So the characters are dynamic. It's there's a transformation in the main character through the book.
You would teach literature, basically.
Yes, because I was a literature teacher. Exactly. I have the elements of a short story in it, and it feels so important to me because I love the books that have stories to it, and I love reading them out loud to my grandchildren. So I really wanted to do this, and I'll tell you the truth, again, because I was a literature teacher and I taught literature like to 11th graders, 12th graders, 10th graders, 9th graders, 6th, 7th, 8th. So to me, it's also important, like the literary aspect of this book. You know, I'm enjoying, meaning if an adult reads this book, the reason, you know, I'll tell you the truth, I was also a librarian. I was also a librarian. Yes, I was in Shari Torah Elementary School. So I was a librarian. I used to I used to buy books for the library every year. And what I realized is that the books that I loved to order and to read to the kids in the library and to my grandchildren and children were books that I enjoyed. If I can get a kick out of a book and I loved reading it, I wanted to read that. And I think Mark Loomer also is that kind of illustrator, that there's multi layers to his illustrations, that when adults look at the pictures, they get a kick out of it because there's so many layers. There's like funny little things happening in it.
And everything. Yeah.
And there's layers that you keep, every time you look at it again, you say, oh my gosh, I didn't realize he did that. And the text, the words to the story are the same thing. Like there's a lot of like play on words. I use the word like, you know, in the first page, it's like, he says, everyone says I have a good head. And then when he has surgery, he goes, I felt like my head was falling off. And then he laughed his head off. And then at the end, I end off with like, like I'm still like something, I'm still great on some level, but I didn't let it go to my head. So there's a lot of those play on words. There's alliteration, there's assonance, there's metaphors, there's similes. There's of course personification because of the sad, mad, and scared. It's like, to me, it's like I'm celebrating like just writing. Like I love like the elements of a story, the literary elements in here. Like it's just so exciting for me to be able to offer this kind of book to our Jewish kids that has a real story with such literary elements. Yeah.
It's very I also have all my hidden things, like even things that the reader wouldn't know. Like in one of my books, I've like one of the, I made sure we went through all 4 seasons, or even like in a spiritual sense, like in my first book that got published, which is I Could Be a Gibar, in my mind, I was basing it on a part in Tanya, which describes that there are four elements, and just like there are four elements, we have four different personalities: fire, water, earth, right, and air. And each of the challenges that the kid is like overcomes as a gibar. One is
Wow.
anger, which is fire. One is bragging, which is air. One is laziness, which is earth. Which one did I skip? One is the taking the Shabbos trees, which is water. Like, I don't have to explain it because
Oh,
there's
that's
so,
fabulous. Oh my goodness. That's
it's behind, it's
amazing.
the intention. At the end of the
Oh,
day, that means that every different type of child will relate. Some kids, right? Some of us as adults struggle more with anger, and some of us struggle more with, with laziness, and some of us with boasting. Like, it's all these different things, and it's what we are. The reader just gets the end product, but we are the ones who really could
wow.
shape and influence. I wanted to read one line that really spoke to me, not from your book, but actually, I think it was like in the introduction, where you wrote about your son, Shimon Hillel, who loved fantasy. I loved how you wrote this, but whose perception of reality and absolute clarity was rooted in his knowledge of Hashem. I thought that was so beautiful. Would you say like the book reflects that? Like, could you expound on that a little bit about your son?
Yeah, so that was actually the
Mhm.
dedication. Like the dedication was about like because he loved fantasies. And when I created the paper menchies and they came alive in the book, really I wanted to like yeah, it felt connected to who Hillel was, that he loved fantasy. He would have loved this book because he loves fantasy and the fact that the menchies came alive. But yet like he was so down to earth. Like he was his Yiddishkeit. He was a tremendous masmid. He finished Tehillim on his free time when he was in Kitta Aleph and in Pre 1A when he learned Tehillim, he learned how to read. He finished the whole Sefer Tehillim in his free time during the year. During recess and lunch, like he and a friend, they were doing it the
Wow.
whole year. Yeah, and so he was like, yeah, like meaning no matter how much fantasy he loved, in he was so grounded in his Yiddishkeit, in his love for Hashem. When he was nift a few weeks before he was nifter, he knew he was going. He knew he was going. He knew he had I don't know if he knew how long he had left, but he knew it was closer than further. And he actually wrote a tzava. He wrote a will, and in the tzava, in the will, he actually wrote. He says, I know that what Hashem is doing is for the best for me. And if I ever doubt him, he says, it's not because I'm really doubting him. It's because maybe I'm overcome with pain for that moment and I lose myself. But know that I don't, I totally believe that what he does is best for me.
I just
But
got
you know
chills.
what? He never lost
I just
himself.
got chills, Mindy.
He
Wow.
it's his yeah, I'm actually putting out another book that I gave in for publishing. It's going through the editor and through the editor and the designer right now. It's called Short But Lived. It'll be coming out next year, I think about Hanukkah time. I don't want to rush it, so I wanted to do for Rosh Hashanah, but I think it'll come out for Hanukkah. And and in that book, I'm going to be putting his will, which he wrote in Lashon HaKodesh, and then I have the English translation, so it will be there. And this book is a memoir about him. It's written for teens and adults, and it's a memoir written through the eyes of of him. Like
Wow.
it's about him.
Like
Yeah, and
like in told in first person.
no, told him it's third person point of view, but through the perspective of the child that he was, like first as a 6-year-old and as he gets
Got
older,
it.
there's that yeah, like I want teens and young adults to be able to relate to it, and I wrote it from like that perspective, because yeah, this was a kid's book. Short But Lived is like for teens and young adults, even though adults obviously will like it a lot. It's really well written, I must tell you. And I hope to put out, if it's coming out for Hanukkah, I hope to put out at the same time a compilation of the Hillel series. I don't know if you know, but in Bina Magazine, I wrote the Hillel series for a few years about like articles about Hillel. And then I've written many, many other articles, and plus I have a lot of new ones. So that'll be a compilation of essays through a mother's perspective. So I have like these 3 books, like for kids.
You're like a fountain nonstop. Your energy
I
is
think I'm done.
contagious.
I think once I finish with Hill and the Paper Menchies, You know, once I finish with this, and then I finish Short But Lived, and then the Hillel series. I think once I'm doing that kind of trilogy, like I think I'm done with that chapter. I think I've written whatever I can about Hillel, and he'll live on in a different way, you know, in our hearts and through the books I've written about him that will give, you know, really, like, I hope I really like Hill and the Paper Men. She's helping kids with challenges. Then the same thing with the other books. I feel like they're each targeting a different age group, but also like overcoming challenge. Yes, I just like I feel like all of these three books are really just targeting different age groups, but the themes are the same. Overcoming challenge, uh, you know, transforming challenges into more than that, into growth. Yeah, it's just that they feel like they all three like that's what they. I feel like I want to spread that kind of hope and just like life and love and just like yeah like life is wonderful and everyone has the resources.
I think I'm just going to wrap up. Thank you, everyone who joined. I definitely enjoyed hearing and getting to know Mindy a little bit and her contagious positive energy. Oh my gosh, like just such creative positive energy. Thank you so, so, so much, Mindy. We're going to leave the replay on if you want to watch it. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And feel free to post questions or comments